Coming up in our newscast tonight. Rehearsals are held ahead of the historic Inter-Korean summit. Every minute detail, including the routes, the order of events, the menu, and even the furniture will be examined to determine necessary changes. President Moon Jae-in holds a phone meeting with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe ahead of the Inter-Korean summit this week. Abe praised the event as a chance to denuclearize the peninsula and touched on ways to improve Pyongyang-Tokyo ties. The plan to allow citizens of South Korea to decide on amending the constitution in June is scrapped. This comes as opposition lawmakers failed to meet the deadline to revise and approve the Referendum Act in time. NEWSCENTER begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, coming to you live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Choi. Once again, our starting point is the Inter-Korean summit. Seoul is extra busy with the final touches, checking the facilities for all the journalists covering the big event and the rehearsals as well. Hwang Ho-jun at the nation's top office has our top story.
The preparatory committee for the Inter-Korean summit held its own rehearsal at the summit venue, the Peace House on the South Korean side of Panmunjom, to ensure everything runs smoothly. It was attended by Presidential Chief of Staff Im Jong-seok, who heads the committee, along with the chiefs of 3 subcommittees in charge of the agenda, communication and public relations, and operations support. The rehearsal looked at every little detail related to the actual summit, including the paths people will take, the order of events, and the furniture inside the building. Though the Blue House didn't give out much detail, the committee convened afterwards to discuss issues or concerns and will make any necessary changes on the final run-through on the eve of the summit. That will involve more detail and, of course, more people. On Wednesday, North Korea will send its delegates led by Kim Chang-sun, an official from Pyongyang State Affairs Commission, to the Peace House, and the two Koreas will hold a rehearsal together. And while the presidential office of Cheongwade did not disclose the time of the rehearsal, it did say it will take place at the exact same time of day when the leaders of Seoul and Pyongyang are set to meet on Friday. They also confirmed there will be no stand-ins for either President Moon or Kim Jong-un. The committee also began operations at 2 situation rooms, which will be making sure everything goes as planned. One is on the 3rd floor of the Peace House itself, and the other at the main press center located at the Kintex Exhibition Hall in Goyang, northwest of Seoul. The main press center, which will welcome media outlets from Korea and abroad, will open on Thursday. As of this Tuesday morning, more than 2,800 reporters from 41 countries have registered. Meanwhile, the Blue House revealed what will be served at the dinner that President Moon and Kim Jong-un will be attending Friday evening. According to the Blue House spokesperson, the dinner menu will reflect the efforts of those who contributed to the peace and unification of the two Koreas. Dishes prepared by Seoul will include ones from the hometowns of the late South Korean presidents Kim Dae-jung and Roh Moo-hyun, as well as from Moon Jae-in's hometown. Also food from Switzerland, where Kim Jong-un spent part of his childhood. Pyongyang-style naengmyeon, or cold noodles, will also be served. We're now in the final countdown to the historic event, to the first meeting of the leaders of the two Koreas in 11 years. And for the Blue House to ensure a successful summit, no detail is too small. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
Let us delve deeper into the schedule for Friday's historic meeting. As exciting as it is, the events leading up to and out of the summit will guarantee a hectic day for all involved. For details, let's turn to our Lee Seung-jae.
With the leaders of the two Koreas set to mark just the 3rd Inter-Korean summit in history, officials from South and North Korea have agreed to begin the summit on Friday morning and hold an official dinner in the evening. The South Korean presidential office says the summit will kick off with a welcoming ceremony for North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. It'll be a busy day at Panmunjom, as the 3rd Inter-Korean summit will take place over a single day, in contrast to the 2 nights and 3 days of talks during the 1st and 2nd Inter-Korean summits in 2000 and 2007. But the biggest difference will be the fact that a North Korean leader will be stepping onto South Korean soil for the first time since the Korean War, with South Korean reporters given access to cover the event in areas on the North Korean side. South Korean media will show live coverage of Kim Jong-un arriving by car before being greeted by President Moon Jae-in. The two leaders are expected to walk hand in hand and cross the military demarcation line and head to the Peace House together while the summit will take place. Officials say an official state dinner is planned for after the summit talks, with a joint statement expected to be released after the dinner. Working-level officials are believed to have discussed whether the wives of the leaders will accompany them or if a joint news conference will be held after the summit. But sources close to the presidential office have declined to comment on those points. While Friday will be hectic, observers hope the summit will be a fruitful one, planting the seed of peace on the Korean Peninsula. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, President Moon Jae-in has spoken with his Japanese counterpart on the phone on Tuesday, just ahead of the very important historic meeting coming up. Through the phone conversation, the two leaders have reaffirmed the summit's importance that can lead to normalizing the ties between Tokyo and Pyongyang. Jong-un shares with us what was discussed.
President Moon Jae-in held a phone meeting with his Japanese counterpart, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, on Tuesday, ahead of the upcoming InterKorean summit on April 27th. During some 40 minutes, Abe welcomed the InterKorean summit this week, calling it a rare chance to denuclearize North Korea. The two leaders agreed to maintain pressure against North Korea to achieve a complete and absolute denuclearization of the peninsula. The two leaders also discussed relations between Pyongyang and Tokyo. While mentioning about the possible meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, Prime Minister Abe expressed his hope that Tokyo and Pyongyang may be able to put their past behind and fundamentally resolve the existing issues between the two. Moon agreed with Abe that the success of the Inter-Korean summit this Friday could pave the way towards normalizing relations between North Korea and Japan. Abe also asked President Moon to help resolve the issue of Japanese citizens abducted by the North Korean regime. The Prime Minister asked Moon to raise the issue of North Korea's abductions of Japanese nationals in the 1970s and 1980s during the summit. The South Korean leader replied that he has raised the issue on the table with North Korea whenever there has been an opportunity in the past, and that he will do so again during the unprecedented meeting with the North Korean leader. Tokyo officially lists 17 citizens as having been abducted by North Korea and suspects the regime is also behind other cases of missing Japanese nationals. Jong-un, Arirang News.
As we count the days, hours, and minutes to the historic event, Seoul's Unification Ministry announced everything is going according to plan, as the ultimate goal should be denuclearization. The ministry highlighted discussions on building peace on the peninsula would be meaningless without it. Oh Jung-hee tells us more.
Building a lasting peace on the Korean Peninsula can't happen by itself without an agreement on denuclearization. That's what a high-level official from South Korea's Unification Ministry told reporters on Tuesday. He said Seoul's goal is to achieve complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula. He said it's too early to tell if a peace treaty could be reached at the summit, but it could be discussed as one of the points of the summit's agenda, along with lowering tensions at the border and taking confidence-building measures. The need for another round of high-level talks or visit by an envoy to the north before the summit seems low, as the official says preparations are currently going well at the working level. The Unification Ministry said Pyongyang showed a willingness to negotiate on denuclearization through Saturday's announcement to halt nuclear missile tests and shut down the Punggye-ri nuclear test site. As to why the North's behavior is so different from last year, he said the reasons are complex, but suggested internal changes within the regime, the impact of international sanctions, and the Moon administration's efforts to mend inter-Korean relations could all have played a part. Because the denuclearization process is to be tackled at the Washington-Pyongyang summit, Seoul reiterated its goal is to lay the groundwork through the Inter-Korean summit. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
Having maintained intense sanctions on Pyongyang with no diplomatic or economic relations with the regime, Japan fears being frozen out of the recent developments on the Korean Peninsula. Kim Min-ji turns the spotlight on how Tokyo may view the upcoming summits.
Japan, within range of North Korea's short to mid-range missiles, has been maintaining a hardline stance towards Pyongyang. No trade, no personal exchanges, and that has put Tokyo out of the picture. There have been reports that Japan is being sidelined in the recent diplomatic developments regarding North Korea. But the country is stepping up efforts of its own, with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe visiting the U.S. And there's also speculation that a Tokyo-Pyongyang summit may be in the works. Tokyo has brushed off concerns of so-called Japan passing, saying the idea that the country is being left out is not true. Prime Minister Abe has stressed that close communication is taking place between the key players, and that Tokyo's approach towards North Korea is closely coordinated with other regional powers. In the U.S., Abe got assurance from President Donald Trump that any deal regarding the North abandoning its missiles should not just cover ICBMs, but also short to mid-range missiles that can reach Japan.
We could say pressure on the regime has brought it to talks, and Japan has been at the forefront there. But when it comes to the talks themselves, as Japan is not part of them, we do need to get information from the parties that are involved, as the issue affects our security interests. At this point, President Trump needs to take the lead, and Japan will likely support whatever the U.S. decides to do. Even though the talks are scheduled, we will probably maintain maximum pressure.
In fact, Japan has been calling on both South Korea and the U.S. not to lift sanctions despite the recent sense of optimism. Given North Korea's past behavior, there are voices in Japan warning that there needs to be a clear definition of what constitutes denuclearization for concrete outcomes to be achieved.
There have been many great agreements and treaties in the past. None of the promises were kept. If some sort of compromise is reached this time, there needs to be a system that oversees whether the agreement is being abided by. For instance, we could set the time frame by which goals have to be achieved.
Further down the road, experts say Japan will have its cards to play, because in exchange for denuclearization, the regime will likely have its own demands, and meeting those demands will require concerted efforts.
Ensuring the security of the North Korean regime is not something the U.S. can do alone. This is where South Korea and Japan come in to promote the North economic cooperation. What Pyongyang will want down the line is the normalization of relations, which will lead to economic support.
On top of that, Japan still has outstanding issues with North Korea, such as the abduction of its citizens, which has raised the possibility of a bilateral summit in the near future. But experts say that will depend on whether there are sincere, visible efforts by North Korea towards denuclearization. Tokyo also needs to believe that talks with Pyongyang would yield positive outcomes, especially at a time when the Japanese Prime Minister is mired in scandal.
If the Prime Minister met with the Kim Jong-un and nothing comes out of the meeting regarding abduction, I'm not entirely sure how the Japanese public would react to that.
Many Japanese experts on North Korea say this could very well be the last opportunity to deal with denuclearization. While on one hand it's an issue that needs to be settled by the U.S. and North Korea, they say neighboring countries like South Korea and Japan will also have to well play the role of advisors to bring about positive and sustainable developments on the way. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News, Tokyo.
South Koreans won't be voting on a referendum on the revision of the nation's constitution. A step deemed crucial for the realization of the amendment was blocked at the National Assembly. President Moon Jae-in expressed regret over the matter, apologizing for not being able to keep his promise with the public. Kim Mo-kyun has the full story.
국민투표법이 끝내 기간 안에 개정되지 않아 지방선거와 개헌 국민투표의 동시 실시가 무산되고 말았습니다. 국회는 대통령이 국민의 뜻을 모아 발의한 헌법 개정안을 단 한 번도 심의조차 하지 않은 채 국민투표 자체를 할 수 없게 만들었습니다.
Chairing the 18th cabinet meeting on Tuesday, President Moon Jae-in expressed regret over the thwarted plan to revise the National Referendum Act. In order for the public vote on the constitutional revision to be held alongside the local elections in June, Monday was the deadline for the Referendum Act to be changed. The current referendum law remains null and void as it was ruled unconstitutional in 2014 for limiting the voting rights of Koreans residing overseas. President Moon further underscored that the proposed constitutional amendment is not intended to benefit neither the ruling party nor the president, but is aimed at ensuring the basic rights of every Korean citizen. Following the president's remarks, political parties started to blame one another for the failure in reaching a consensus. Lawmakers from the ruling Democratic Party put the blame on the main opposition Liberty Korea Party, accusing it of intentionally disrupting the constitutional amendment, while those from the Liberal Korea Party criticized the government and the Democratic Party for handing over a rough proposal that forewent proper legal procedure in order to pass a rushed constitutional amendment by the June elections. Considering the current situation, President Moon said that he will decide what to do with his government proposal on the Constitution's revision after the 2018 InterKorean summit set for Friday. The president is yet to decide whether he would push for the passage of the government proposal or take it back, but if he decides to go with the former, the National Assembly has until May 24th to vote on the draft bill. Kim Mo-kyun, Arirang News.
A van rammed into pedestrians in Toronto, taking lives and injuring more than a dozen people. Among the dead are 2 South Korean nationals, as details have not yet been released. Another Korean is seriously hurt and 3 others are still disconnected. Lee Ji-won has the latest.
2 South Koreans have been reported to be among the dead in the van rampage incident in Toronto. Seoul's foreign ministry said Tuesday afternoon that of the 3 South Koreans previously reported to have been injured, 2 had died, with 1 still being treated for a rib fracture. Another of the dead is a Canadian national of Korean descent. The ministry also said there were 9 South Koreans who initially couldn't be contacted. 6 of them are now known to be safe, but the whereabouts of the other 3 are still unknown. There is much concern about the safety of South Korean nationals as the attack occurred in Toronto's downtown, where the city's Koreatown is located. The incident occurred at about 1:30 Monday afternoon local time in the North York area at the intersection of Yonge Street and Finch Avenue. The driver of the white rental van is said to have jumped the curb, striking a number of pedestrians.
He just went on the sidewalk. He just started hitting everybody, man. He hit every single person on the sidewalk. Anybody in his way he would hit. The bus stop, everything got shattered.
And there was 4 bodies on the ground. Police and the ambulance hadn't arrived yet, but people were trying to revive them. Obviously to no avail. But by the time the police and paramedics got there, they tried again and didn't work. And so they covered the bodies, put them in body bags, and taken them away.
The suspect fled the scene but was arrested after a tense standoff with police several blocks away. He's now in custody and being investigated, but details of the probe are still scarce. According to U.S. media, he has been identified as 25-year-old Alec Minasian, a college student who, unlike previous reports, was not known to the authorities. Police believe he acted deliberately, and they are trying to determine his motive, but they added that the incident doesn't currently appear to be related to terror. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who was at a meeting with the foreign ministers of the G7 leading industrialized nations, issued a brief statement Monday afternoon, expressing his condolences to those affected. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now, the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee voted in favor of Mike Pompeo becoming the new Secretary of State. Although he needs full Senate approval to be confirmed, several Democrats said they will back the CIA chief, making his formal appointment this week highly likely. Park Ji-won gets us up to speed with the developments.
Members of the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee cast their votes on Monday on current CIA Director Mike Pompeo's nomination for the Secretary of State.
We will now move to the nomination of Mike Pompeo to be Secretary of State.
11 voted in favor and 9 opposed the nomination. It was a party-line vote with all 11 Republican members supporting the nomination, while 9 Democrats opposed on the grounds of Pompeo being too hawkish and over his past remarks about homosexuality and Islam.
We will report him to the floor in a positive manner. I want to thank members of this committee for the diligence they've displayed. I think we've done the right thing together.
Pompeo now needs to gain final approval from the full Senate later this week to be confirmed as the new top U.S. diplomat. His nomination needs a simple majority out of the 100-seat Senate, where the Republicans enjoy a 51-49 majority. Watchers expect Pompeo will have no problem in getting the votes required to become the next U.S. Secretary of State, as 3 Democrats on the Senate have already said they will endorse him. As current CIA Director, Mike Pompeo met with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un earlier this month during his secret visit to Pyongyang to make arrangements before the projected summit talks between the U.S. and North Korea. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Washington has been leading the post-World War II liberal order as an advocate of free trade and democracy. But the Trump administration's America First policy is raising concerns about a potential trade war and possible disruptions to U.S. alliances. Kim Hye-sung brings us some experts' take on the developments, especially in relations to the North Korea crisis.
Yes, we're living in a new era, and a new era requires new thinking. And I believe that this involves reshaping and rethinking the liberal international order. The liberal international order, in Donald Trump's view, cannot mean a blind adherence to the old way of doing things, including interference in all the world's crises.
More than 100 scholars, former government officials, and experts from Korea, the U.S., Japan, and China gathered in Seoul Tuesday to discuss the changes that have occurred over the past year since Donald Trump became president. Most experts at this year's Asan Plenum agreed that some of Trump's policies, like imposing tariffs and amending trade deals, have added to uncertainty in the global economy and the existing multilateral trade framework. But on the security front, they argued that Trump's policies on Syria and North Korea show America's strong security alliance with NATO and South Korea, and that there could be a potential breakthrough in solving the North Korea crisis through the upcoming summit talks. For those to be a success, experts said the first step is coordination between Seoul and Washington, like narrowing down the definition of denuclearization via Washington's policy of CVID, or a complete, verifiable, and irreversible dismantlement, or a gradual nuclear dismantlement. At the same time, discussions are also needed about what the U.S. and South Korea are willing to give to North Korea in terms of sanctions, military exercises, a security guarantee, or a peace treaty.
To talk about peace treaty this early, I think, is a bit unconventional. It's something that should, if we do it, something should directly involve the United States, because the United States was a signatory to the armistice on behalf of the UN. This should directly involve China. Kim Jong-un could ask for too much. You know, Donald Trump may want to give too little. Donald Trump may want to give too much. I mean, there's so many possible scenarios here.
Unconventional is good if that approach succeeds. But given the high stakes, experts warn that more preparation, a closer look into the details, and coordination between Seoul and Washington are key to using these talks to help achieve peace on the Korean Peninsula. Kim Hye-sung, Arirang News.
Time to turn to Michelle back at the Weather Center for the updates you need. Michelle, after more than a day of rain and quite strong winds, temperatures have dropped significantly.
Yes, Daniel, it was quite chilly, but I dare say it wasn't such a nuisance when we consider the fresh air that we had in return. And the clean air quality we have now is expected to last well past tomorrow under sunny skies. Now, however, morning lows will drop to single-digit readings in some parts. That said, Seoul will begin Wednesday at 8 degrees Celsius. But watch out for the hot, huge temperature gaps into the day. Daily highs in Seoul will soar up to 22 degrees, while Daegu and Gyeongju top out to 21 and 18 degrees, respectively. The rest of the week will be sunny and breezy as well, with daily highs remaining into the 20s. Now, on the day of the InterKorean Summit this Friday in Panmunjom, the weather will be favorable. Mercury will start at 7 degrees in the morning and hit 21 degrees into the afternoon under a cloudless sky. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we have in store for you on tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. As always, thank you for watching.